Hi, Jeanine. Thank you so much for being here with us today for Chin Hung Institute podcast.
Thank you. It's such my honor. Thank you for asking.
Jeanine, you teach all over the country. I feel like I see Jeanine Canty, Dr. Jeanine Canty everywhere, all over the
Wow.
media. And I just would love if you could introduce yourself, tell us who you are, and maybe even share your new book, which is super
Oh,
exciting. And
sure. Sure. Well, my name's Jeanine Canty, and I am a professor at CIIS in San Francisco, but I actually telecommute from Boulder, Colorado, most of the time. Actually, right now I'm in Arizona. And I am really immersed in transdisciplinary scholarship, and I straddle areas such as ecopsychology, transpersonal studies, ecological and social issues, as well as I'd say I like using the term Buddhist, definitely contemplative practice. And maybe my more of my root area is around transformative learning, transformative studies, and how adults can shift their perspectives to be more resilient. And my newest book is, I'll show you the cover. It's so beautiful. I love it. An artist I know created this, and the book's called Ecological and Social Healing, Multicultural Women's Voices. And it's a second expanded edition. The first version of this came out about 7 years ago, and now it feels even more timely. Yeah. And yeah, yes.
yeah, I wonder from the little that I understood from your book. I feel like there's just so much to study there, so much to learn.
Oh yeah.
So I
Oh
know
yeah.
knowledge is very small, so forgive me, but I noticed that there's a big highlight on mindful engagement with nature.
Yes. And maybe just so the audience knows, we're talking about I have it, my marked up copy here, the returning the self to nature, undoing collective narcissism and healing our planet. And yeah. So talk a little bit about the collective narcissism and yeah. Great. Yes. And I know both of us have lineage through Naropa University in Boulder. And I actually wrote the book while I was teaching there. And during that time, I had an experience with someone who, might be labeled as a narcissist, but that's not really, it wasn't about the person, but I ended up studying a lot of the patterns of extreme narcissism or narcissistic personality disorder. And it also reminded me that in a lot of the early eco-psychology teachings, some of the scholars talk about the phenomenon of narcissism. And I think that's just spiraled. And so collective narcissism is really looking at how not as just individuals, but our society. And I would particularly name US society, but really any society that's subsumed under the paradigm of corporate globalization, how we've really been bred to be narcissists. Our society wants us to be hyper focused on outward pursuits, on consumerism, which also makes us feel really insecure that we need more and more. This constant need to feel special. The phenomenon of just even social media, we're all in some ways creating our own perpetual story of how wonderful we are, myself included, and I will own that. And we're just encouraged to do that, but it really has kind of hardwired, in some ways, our identity that we're always facing outward. And we do this in so many ways of having less empathy for others or compassion for others because we're so fixated in our own stories and our own thought processes. And there's a kind of a whole package of things that relate to that. And in being collective narcissists, well, the good thing is that none of us, most of us are not really um, extreme narcissists or classified with the narcissistic personality disorder, which is really just a very small percentage of the population. So we inherently can break out of that paradigm. And with collective narcissism as well, as I said, we have little compassion for other humans, but maybe more or equally importantly, is we have such little time and awareness of what's going on in the collective suffering of Earth. All sentient beings, the planet. And so just really looking at that phenomenon in our world.
Yeah. I wonder how do we get out of that though? How do we really get out of collective narcissism when we look at the world and I mean, we look at Instagram, we look at Facebook, TikTok. I don't really know what everyone uses anymore these days.
Right. Yeah.
And everyone's like, look at me. I am so great. My life is so lovely. But then that's not the
Yeah.
reality.
Right. Yeah. Well, and in some ways, I wrote this piece. It was a more of an academic piece than the book, the returning the self to nature. It's kind of the last kind of things that were almost too heady to include in that book, but I published it somewhere else, and it rooted around this idea from the founder of ecopsychology, Theodore Roszak, and he just has a little statement in one of his books that, you know, saying perhaps narcissism is in some way an evolutionary thing. And I said, oh, I don't know about that. But it actually, in some ways, made sense because prior to this, especially um, rooting back to all of our lineages as earth-based peoples, we were more about the collective, and so many cultures still are about, and we actually need to be about the collective, yet with our kind of the birth of our rational ego, self-conscious, conscious, and just being in the thinking order, we're really in eco psychology, we talk about this term arrested development, where really we're just babies and we're very immature because we have this new ability that we haven't integrated in our much longer lineage. And so Roszak was saying, and I've written about this in a different way, that perhaps we are all unique and special because, of course, we are. But most of us want to do that in a ranking order where we're more special and we're, higher, better, bigger, smarter, sexier, prettier, whatever it is. Yet, what if we can all be these kind of brilliant, bright stars, but in a whole sea of the sky? Or, I do an exercise around being a sunflower and then realizing, oh, I'm in a field of sunflowers and we're all radiant and brilliant. So, in terms of getting out of our collective narcissism, there's so many different kind of pathways, pattern breaking. One is, just what we're doing right now is in terms of having information and kind of unraveling that paradigm and being conscious and being critically reflective about how that relates to our larger society, and then oh, how does that relate to me and my habits? In transformative learning, there's theory that talks about worldview construction and how our worldview it is comprised of two dimensions, and the first is a habit of mind, and the second is a resulting point of view. And the habit of mind is all of the ways that we've been conditioned, the things we've inherited. So maybe our gender, our race, our nationality, our political beliefs, the region we live in, our educational levels, and those are all valid descriptors of us, but we're much bigger, and our authentic selves are much bigger. And then the second dimension is the way we act out our habit of minds, all of our acculturations. And so as we do things to break those patterns. And so definitely information awareness is one practice, but as we know, the embodiment of that is even more important. So meditation is a wonderful way. Mindfulness is such a big term, but actually being able to inhabit our bodies, connect to our emotions, and um, really track more of our momentary experiences. I think it's important to note that narcissistic personality disorder, this collective meme, it results from having damaging experiences in early childhood through our primary caregivers, whether that's a parent or another adult or whoever raised us. And so, for someone who is really has narcissistic personality disorder, they had one of two faulty patterns. Object relations theory, or now we call more attachment theory, will speak to this, where we either had a parent who had excessive demands on us, and so we were always, trying to please them, and kind of on pins and needles trying to please them. And then the other pattern is attention withdrawn too early. So the child just didn't never had their needs met because their primary caregiver was so busy or hyper focused on other things. And it doesn't matter which pattern, both result in damaged trust. And so, again, collectively, we don't actually have narcissistic personality disorder, but with collective narcissism, looking at how our trust has been damaged. And I take the that object relations theory and think about, and other eco-psychologists have, relate our primary caregiver as Mother Earth, which is really important. Yet in eco-psychology, we talk about how we've broken our connection to Earth, and we've pulled ourselves out of the reality that we're actually Earth beings, animals, and exert control over the earth and separate our psyches from earth. And in a lot of ways, we've replaced Mother Earth as our primary giver with a father who is more of a global corporate parent. And it doesn't have to be a male father, but this more hierarchical, patriarchal identity. And so we kind of, literally pledge allegiance to a tradition that's not our own in terms of our original way of being. And that's actually another whole process with this. One of my favorite authors, Chalice Glendinning, who's a psychotherapist, and a lot of folks in eco-psychology are aware of her work. And she's got a great book called My Name is Chalice, and I'm in Recovery from Western Civilization. It's a great one to read on a plane. Uh, but she has further developed this concept called the primal matrix, which is really building on the work of Christina and Stanislav Grof. and but it really looks at like what was our original intact relationship with nature. And she paints three dimensions, and the first is having a sense of belonging and trust in the world. So, really feeling at home in our bodies, in our places, our habitats, and not necessarily like everything's safe, but we feel like we belong here. And then the second dimension is basically having a unique purpose in life, which is very different than just having a career, which hopefully they can intersect, but often we're conditioned to think we have to have these really awesome careers that bring us the biggest bank accounts. Yet, so many wisdom traditions talk about how we're born into this world with a gift to give, and that's really our unique calling. And it's really the task of the community to help us unfold that. And that's been lost so much in our current societies. And then the third dimension of that primal matrix is experiencing non-ordinary states of awareness. And you don't have to, take psychedelics or go on a 40-day nature immersion to get there. It's like the most simple things. And I love relating it. It's like finding the extraordinary in the very ordinary. And so these can be being in nature and having a deep moment of connection, perhaps with another being, or for me, sometimes, or maybe you have a big dream that just blows your mind, or I like to, when you have those moments of like unbridled laughter with a friend where you start drooling, that's, I think that's one. Or you have like the most, the perfect bowl of soup with just the right seasonings and it's just the right temperature. And you just feel that drip down your throat and you can literally feel it softly landing in your belly. So yeah, those non-ordinary states of awareness. So getting back into those and realizing that all of those dimensions of the primal matrix are things that we can re-invoke and practice. There's a whole, do you want me to keep going? There's so many other areas of how do we heal from this. Should I speak to a few
Yeah.
more?
Yeah.
Okay, great. One of my favorites, which is comes from the traditions of both uh, Arnie Ness, the co-founder of the Deep Ecology movement, as well as our beloved elder Joanna Macy, the Buddhist deep ecologist. Um, Arnie Ness talks about the ecological self, and Joanna Macy would talk about it more as the greening of the self. And this is the idea that when, not that it's more of a practice, but when we spend time in nature, just as I was speaking about, um, that often we start to extend our boundaries of self, where instead of thinking we're just, these bobbleheads or these, bounded cocoon bodies or however we may frame it, that perhaps we're outside and uh, the same, right, these days when I'm outside, I'm often having connections with the same bunnies that come through, these rabbits. And um, we actually, oh, you're here. Oh, I mean, I'm sure the bunny's like, oh, she's here. I don't know, but there becomes this like affection. And so whenever I see the bunny, I get all excited and um, all of a sudden I care about their well-being and I'm making dinner and I say, oh, maybe I'll bring a little bit of this cabbage outside for the bunny. Or when I'm in Boulder, I often grow some extra greens for the bunnies. And I realize that my well-being is bound up with their well-being. And there's just a little bit of like love affair going on there. And when we learn to have that ecological self with one being, we start to do that with many beings, perhaps mountain or rain or just our whole bioregion. And as we do this more and more, we become bigger and bigger in our expanded boundaries and levels of compassion. And a lot of the work I do also pairs that with this term, the multicultural self. And this is so much around the belonging work that as we learn the stories of someone who's different than us, we also start kind of expanding our boundaries and we become curious. And as we, oh, really? Oh, then love breeds between us. And sometimes it's with people who, we think, oh, I don't have, and maybe I don't really have anything in common with them, but I start having appreciation and respect and perhaps a little bit of love. And while it's beneficial for both of us, for me, I notice that my boundaries then get expanded. And same thing with practice, mindfulness, meditation, as we kind of practice and learn how to see our continual thought loops and habits, which, aren't necessarily bad, but when we see them, and then when we start to have moments of, oh, something else, and then we may feel connected to something that's like, oh, much bigger than me, some sort of force or vibe or yeah. And so when we keep pairing, and there's other selves too, like the imaginal self, which so much I think of the pain in our world right now is kind of when I was talking about the unique purpose in life, everyone's purpose has something to do with being creative. And it doesn't mean you have to like create artwork, but we're all creative beings. And so many of us, our creativity has been stifled, or we've been told, we don't have that talent, or that's not for us. And so when we have the ability to express our creativity in of other forms. So yeah, all this, I guess, fluidity of selves. I love calling it selving because it rhymes with elving, of course. Yeah, and that also relates to one of the biggest parts of this is having a sense of grace. I've found, and people with that have narcissistic personality disorder, they have to create this really tightly bound world where, of course, they're at the center and the most important being. And again, it's a protective realm because they feel so unsafe in the larger world because they have that damaged trust. And it's really, really difficult for someone with narcissistic personality disorder to get out of that. Um, Yet, uh, as I was saying, most of us don't have narcissistic personality disorder. And a big thing of getting out of our locked in worldviews is to recognize that there's much bigger energies than just our world or even the human world. And so when we can have some sort of trust and opening in that way, we actually get unlikely helpers. And, that's a much bigger kind of topic and also much bigger practice. But sometimes even just asking for help and participating in the knowledge that if I open and am sincere, um, I don't have to solve, fix, do everything, and that there's like love in the world and yeah, so many things available.
I love how you just bridged eco psychology, transpersonal psychology, and Eurocentric psychology together.
Oh, good. Thank you. Transdisciplinarity, right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank
So,
you.
so for those listening, if they've never heard of eco-psychology,
Yeah.
can you talk about that? What is it, and
Oh,
why is it
sure.
so important right now?
Yeah, and it really is so important. And the field itself really emerged in the 90s. And I always love when you read anything about eco-psychology, it also says that it's an emerging field. I mean, and it is, it's still a baby in some ways. And I mentioned the father of eco-psychology, and the mother is of course the earth. But Theodore Roszak, he has a quote that says, once upon a time, everything was, basically eco-psychology, because indigenous wisdom is eco-psychology, or eco-psychology pulls from that in so many ways, but it's really addressing humans of Western civilization, and corporate global civilization, and how we've pulled our identities away from the living world, and really see ourselves as distinct and separate, and really have numbed ourselves off out of the kind of connectedness. And eco psychology has four key assumptions. And the first is that the planet is calling for healing. And I don't think I need to break that down. We have so many kind of statistics and phenomenon that we see in our world around climate crisis. And the second assumption is that humans are calling for healing. And I probably don't need to break that down either, but we have so much suffering in the world from in just normal suffering, which we can probably agree that suffering, of course, is part of the human experience, but we actually have what John Powell would call surplus suffering, that we create with our systems so much excess suffering when we see how much poverty there is in the world, or how many unhoused people there are in our society. We see so many people with addiction issues, whether it's to drugs or alcohol, or technology, to codependent relationships, to shopping, consumerism, and the list goes on. We also see so many people immersed in, diagnosed pathologies, whether it's, from depression, anxiety, to some of these, more formal terms. And and the list goes on in terms of we can talk about racism, lashback about around certain groups and women, and LGBTQ populations, and so much there. And just really looking at how there's so much suffering in the world. And when we connect that to the first assumption that the planet's calling for healing, and that people are calling for healing, that these aren't distinct phenomenon, they're totally interconnected. And then the last assumption is that the history and culture of Western civilization, corporate globalism, is kind of the sickness and the pathology there. And it's not saying that everything Western is bad, of course not. But this kind of over focus on the self, and the over focus on materialism, and this type of success is really, in a lot of ways, killing people and the planet. And eco psychology was created for kind of a two reasons. I mean, I talked about those assumptions, but first, the ecological movement was kind of not so was less effective than it could be, because so many of the tactics, and this is also applies to a lot of the social justice movements, that we realize that, shaming and blaming isn't really an effective strategy. I don't think anyone is like, I really change when someone shames and blames me. We tend to shut down. In transformative learning theory, we really talk about you can just go just past someone's edge of eff- efficacy, their comfort zone. So, turning on the full force fire hose with lots of statistics and demands isn't very effective. And so that the environmental movement could learn a lot from psychology and just developmental models and how you work with people and the emotional components to all of this and the psyche. And then the second kind of phenomenon reason eco-psychology is it's also a critique of mainstream psychology, which focuses so much just on the individual. So we may be experiencing all these, polycrises in the world, yet we can go to a one-on-one session with our therapist and they want to know more about your relationship with your parents, your partner, or, your just personal history. And it's like, well, wouldn't one be very ill if we take in all of the illness and suffering of the collective world? And that's for me actually one of the most beautiful parts of eco psychology and this work is in some ways it decouples the idea of an opponent because when we assumption in there is that and Charles Glendenning talks about this and others that everyone under these systems are traumatized. We all have the pathology, so we have to look at one another with kind of new eyes of compassion. Like even the person who seems to be benefiting so much from these structures and systems is actually quite wounded and suffering. So it's like, oh, okay. Yeah, yeah.
Beautiful. And Jeanine, can you speak a little bit about your practice working through all of this, your
Oh, yeah.
personal practice, and kind of how you share that out with the world?
Yeah, like what I do on the day to day. Oh, yeah, yeah. And
And for yourself, right? For yourself,
yeah,
for the whole, for the collective.
yeah. Gosh, I feel like I have so many things. Oh, definitely. I mean, I even just from when I wake up in the morning, because sometimes that's like a whole thing. Because I'm very into the dream world, and so that's maybe the last practice I do is really paying attention to my dreams and maybe some of the dreams that involved more of a collective message, especially when it's the kind of animal connections and other beings in the world. But just even waking up with as soon as like any that list or just saying the word love like and reminding myself that gosh what a precious thing to be alive. Um I I I may never have the opportunity to be a sentient being and I can do things like this and like all sorts of and just getting really grateful for those things. And I definitely, in terms of just making sure I have healthy sustenance, both food and the people and the experiences I immerse myself in. And I spend a lot of time, I'm a big kind of exercise person. I try not to do exercise where I can hurt myself, but like, making sure I go on a brisk walk every day. And while I'm on the walk, that I actually pay attention and let the experiences that are supposed to happen instead of just shutting down. I'm definitely a meditator. I try to do at least 20 minutes a day, and I also don't shame and blame myself, but I actually really appreciate meditating outside and with my eyes open, not staring at any being, but just being kind of awake and alert and noticing what happens, or just being part of what is happening, even if it seems like nothing. Um, Reading is important to me. And then relationships. All of us need to have community. And, love relationships are great, but I think the bigger relationships, whether it's with our families, but also our community, even our work communities, are so important. And being able to practice some of the skills that I speak of and I study and I've tried to not be an armchair academic where I know a bunch of stuff but then I don't practice it. So there's meditation practice, but then just like stepping into the world with all those rich interaction, and we have so many opportunities these days for like, oh, okay. Yeah, so and I do a lot of yoga and I do actually. I mean, writing is a creative, dreaming is creative, and I also yeah, I have a guitar and I like to sing and yeah, oh, so many things. Yeah.
I love that. I love how you bring what did you say? Armchair Scott or
Armchair academic. Oh, and
armchair
then I'm a
academic?
big gardener. I can't not say I love growing food. And so yeah, I love getting dirty in the garden. And in Boulder, I have a community garden plot. So it's like my plot, and then there's probably at least another 100 plots of people. And then yeah, it's just amazing. And so many animals and other beings are there all the time. So really special.
So, according to your practices and your knowledge and your wisdom, Janine,
Yeah.
people, so many people, they want to be free from suffering, from this extra suffering. How did you call it, Janine?
John Powell says surplus suffering, which I'm like,
Yeah.
oh yeah, yeah, right.
Yeah. So, how do what can they do today? What can happen
Yeah,
today, right now, to just get out of the surplus
out of the
aspect of suffering?
surplus. Yeah, well, I think, um, gosh, that's a good question. I mean, so much of it is seeing what are all the extra things we kind of get spun up in that we don't need to, from like our consumer patterns, how much television and other media we might take in. Although it's important to be like aware and know what's going on, but how much time do you need to do that, and um, how much does it work you in a tizzy? So, knowing that, and same thing with the people we surround ourselves. I mean, while we don't want to surround ourselves with like a comfortable bubble, we also there's people in our worlds that might be more dramatic or kind of stirring it up all the time, and they may enjoy that, and maybe we enjoy that, and just noticing that and choosing maybe to pull ourselves out of those situations. um yeah, and then I mean, I think too there's so much surplus suffering from our inability to actually feel our normal suffering, like our pains, our deep emotions, and that is like a clear way to I guess be, what is it, unshakable, right? Of actually, oh, here comes fear. What does fear feel like? Maybe I can sit with fear and feel it fully in my body for a little bit. And then as you're really, and like, oh my gosh, fear just left. And same thing, like when I'm mad, instead of being like, oh, I'm so mad, I'm like, I mean, I am. I'm like, oh, I'm so mad. And I'm like, and I'm gonna be good at being mad right now, and just like really let that burn through, and then it actually goes away. And same thing when I remember years and years ago, I have all these like cycles of heartbreak is one of my paths. I guess to everyone, Um, uh, but one time I had gone through a breakup and I was outside on my deck and I was, I'm glad I was outside crying, but I was crying and so sad. And all of a sudden, this like beautiful bluebird came by. I'm crying. I'm like, you're so beautiful. And it's like, gosh, you're like ruining my sadness because you're so joyful, It's like, yeah, like just the that saying, like the only way through is through. I don't know if that's exact, but like just get in it, be in it. Don't fear that. Yeah, because it will shift, and these painful, difficult emotions are such a gifts of being a sentient being.
Yeah, I think it's the only way out is through.
Yeah, yes, yes.
Yeah,
Right.
it's funny. Human beings, all of us, like ordinary people, we're so addicted to our own suffering. Why
Yeah.
is that?
Um, well, I think it is also part of this kind of narcissism, and how we're encouraged to be so addicted to our own stories. And so, yeah, even, in being a student within more counseling therapy circles too, um, there can be, oh, your story. Well, wait till you hear my story. Mine even, so it even becomes a competition who had it worse. And yeah, we're really encouraged in a lot of ways to do that because we're encouraged to be these fierce individuals rather than when we actually um, learn more and share our stories and really listen and really then also hear the stories of other folks and other beings and other places and history when we're like, oh, um, everyone suffers. Everyone has stories of suffering. Oh, this is part of life. And so as we can, break out of our immature selves and really step into that maturity, then we can also, with that wisdom, get less addicted to those stories and experiences of suffering, and also look to the spaces that we have empowerment and empowerment, especially through, well, beautiful moments, and also what Arnie Ness would call beautiful acts, where we can serve and feel when we do serve it, we're actually the big benefiters. So yeah, yeah. Oh. Right.
Beautiful. Janine, before we close, can
Yeah.
I ask you, so your new book, Ecological and Social Healing, Multicultural Women's Voices, this is the second
Yeah.
edition.
Yes.
Super exciting. It just came out, I think, what is it, April 1st or 2nd?
April 2nd or 3rd. It was a little confusing, but yes, it is out last week. Yeah.
Yeah, tell us,
Yeah.
tell us the significance of this text and why why should people who are listening to this buy it and read it and
Yeah, thank you for asking about that. And it's a collection of about 18 women's and femmes, whatever labels we use, and really looking at how the intersections of our work as both um, working around ecological issues and social issues, those intersections have really brought new kind of paradigms and practices and levels awareness of what healing is. And I really wanted to, there's like in permaculture, there's this when two different zones, eco zones interlap, the zone in between kind of sprouts properties not found in either zone. And so I wanted to gather the stories of folks that aren't kind of positioned in just one reality, one field, one identity, and that have been really working for some time around these issues and like what ripe fruits have you harvested? What should we know? And so the stories are all sorts of, and this one, it's an expanded edition. So there's a lot of new people as well as some returning contributors and all sorts of things around kind of water and um, mind shifts and um, ritual and ceremony. And as Joanna Macy would talk about, holding actions in defense of the earth and spirituality. And yeah, so all sorts of things strewn together and also kind of new stories and new paradigms and practices. And so there's not, one concluding like, this is what we need to do, but like, oh, here are so many different offerings and how beautiful. And there's most of the women would be kind of characterized as women and femmes of color, as well as some Anglo women. And a lot of Indigenous women. And so it's just, it's powerful and beautiful. And I just so feel grateful to be asked and that all the women who I asked actually and femmes said yes. Yeah.
Would a man benefit from reading this?
Oh my gosh, yes, definitely, definitely. And it's not meant at all to be um, binary or exclusive, but just often these are voices that aren't heard as much as some other voices. And yeah, so I think anyone that's interested in these issues as well as transformations and kind of intersections of, when things come together, what's the new, would be interested. Yeah.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Jeanine, not only for this interview, but also for your contribution to the transcultural and
Mm.
transdisciplinary fields and really being a
Mm.
contributor to the transformation of this world. Thank
Thank
you.
thank you so much. Yeah, yeah, I feel honored and I always laugh that I feel like for those of us, yourself included, that maybe have done a lot of meditation in our lives, sometimes, and not to call you this, but sometimes in my own life, I'm like, something was like, well, she's a pretty ready, empty vessel. Let's give her some work to do. And so I just feel thankful to ancestors and teachers and mentors and Earth. Yeah. And you. Yeah.
Likewise, thank you. And I hope we can all be an empty vessel so that
Yeah.
we can continue the work.
Yeah.
Thank you.